Hi, and welcome to Night Clerk Radio. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Mallsoft, the most relaxing criticism of consumerism you'll listen to all day. And with me, as always, is my co-host, Burke. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Ross?
I'm quite excited, actually, because Mallsoft is one of the first genres of vaporwave I really got into. One of the albums we're reviewing today was one of my first, I really like vaporwave sort of albums. I like when I discovered Yes, We're Open, I was, I'm sold 100%, even more so from Infinity Frequency. And Mallsoft is kind of like vaporwave for a lot of people because it's the soundtrack for abandoned malls in general. That's sort of the tagline for the genre as a whole. And this is very much a very focused look at malls and retail establishments in general and their use of music. So I'm really excited to talk about Mallsoft.
Yeah, me too. So do you want to tell people a little bit about what Mallsoft is, sort of ideologically, how it interfaces with vaporwave?
Yeah, Mallsoft is music that it's the muzak, as it's commonly called, used in malls and retail stores, and also combines that. So we take that music, that sort of very easy listening music, and also then combine it with field recordings of actual stores, and then also do distortions and other edits to make it sound like you're in a weird mall of some kind or a store of some kind, and you are sort of trapped or on your next shopping trip. Don't you want to listen to this?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's really less about recognizable pop samples, like, you know, the albums we did from the first episode as our introduction to vaporwave, because there's a lot of like jazz and Latin and other stuff worked in there.
Yeah, bossa nova and all that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, which unfortunately was like the cool music of the 60s and has now been appropriated into elevator music, which is unfortunate because a lot of it's pretty interesting. But yeah, I think the most interesting thing to me about Mallsoft, aside from obvious, you know, criticism of consumerism and like that nostalgia for just going to places and buying things before the internet, I really like that creation of space. So the effects wash out for a lot of these is designed, you'll hear, to make them sound distant, like they're echoing through a big empty mall. So it really gets into both of our love of like, you know, liminal places and like being trapped somewhere.
Trapped is an interesting term.
Well, it's because it's so artificial in construction. So if you look at a lot of the album art and like the visual side of stuff, because this is, of course, a music podcast, but vaporwave has a strong visual component.
It's all about the aesthetic.
Yeah, it's all about the aesthetic. These places are often depicted as not really, I guess this has sort of shifted. There's been like a decay move, but a lot of the early stuff, like the places are pristine. They're like perfectly clean and white and like evenly lit, and they're empty. It's like your space. There's nobody there but you.
Right. Well, or for me, I think it's about the experience of shopping alone, because the Mallsoft often has field recordings, which include the sound of people talking in the distance, but there's no one talking to you. There's no like clearly audible dialogue. There's no one with you. And that's your experience for most of us going to the mall. You may not on, you know, maybe not holiday shopping or whatever, but just going to get a thing or stopping at the food court to get lunch. And you're there. What do you experience? What do you feel when you're in the mall alone? Just because you're in the mall alone doesn't mean you're alone as a person, but you're kind of by yourself. It's a very isolating experience.
Yeah. So there's actually this concept of being alone in public is sort of what it's called, where you're out in a place with people, but you're not with people. It's sort of interesting because like Dan Olson and stuff have done talking about like that's the appeal of stuff like No Man's Sky.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Because you're out and you're in an area with NPCs, but often you can't speak their language. And it's like notable if they can. And you're just sort of stuck in this realm trying to get by.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I hadn't even thought about that. But for me, the first thing I think about when I think of Mallsoft is obviously the context, where we're kind of talking about the location and also your relationship to malls and retail stores. Because it's not just limited to malls. Every retail store out there plays music now, or almost all of them. And if you look this up, there's an entire industry of experts and companies that cater to retail establishments to create the perfect audio environment for shopping. You know, restaurants will play music, certain types of music at certain tempos in order to get people to get in and eat and then get them out. You know, Hot Topic picks the right sounding music that's still pretty cheap to buy. So it sounds kind of like the genres that the person who goes to Hot Topic would listen to, but it's not them. The obvious thing is like, oh, I hate music. I hate it. It's so fake. It's so artificial. Well, the problem is it works.
Yep.
The corporations and private, they have a lot of idiocies and they have a lot of inefficiencies. But if it didn't work at all, if there was no appreciable effect of playing music in stores, they wouldn't be spending all of this money on it. Eventually, they would realize, oh, this is a huge waste of money. Let's cut it. It's also important to remember you're not immune to propaganda. You're not immune to this. We don't want to accept that we can be manipulated by the music used in stores. But Mallsoft acknowledges that, and it's okay to have positive memories or sort of nostalgia about shopping because it's a big part of our lives now. That's sort of this whole key element of this is that, we are in store. We go to stores to be manipulated. Everything about the store is to manipulate us into buying. And yet we accept that. We subconsciously realize that, but we still accept it because like, oh, we got a new thing and I feel better. Or like I have to do this. I don't have a choice. So I might as well get used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually really interesting because the concept of being out in spaces today, where I will often now have like headphones and I'll be listening to my own music. But it's interesting where if I've had experiences where I'll go grocery shopping and like I'll throw on my headphones and flip them on, but forget to start music because I'll just like fight people to get a card or whatever. And I'll walk around for about 10 minutes shopping with like noise canceling headphones on. So I don't hear anything, but I have no music. And it's like very unsettling, actually. It's very weird how quickly something starts to feel off when you're not having noise blasted into your brain by something.
We are uncomfortable with silence as a culture, like as a society. We are very deeply uncomfortable in silence. And I don't know when that began, how long that's been part of us. Obviously, it was different when there was no recorded music technology, but
you had the sounds of like nature and stuff, right?
Well, think about a city from, the 19th century, before phonographs and whatever, like it was just people, and talking. I mean, maybe live music every once in a while, but that was hardly the norm, I would imagine.
Only for the most affluent.
We are deeply uncomfortable with that. Like, imagine going to a restaurant and all you can hear are people eating and,
Sounds
silverware clacking. Yeah, exactly. It sounds gross. It sounds gross, especially at like not even a sit down restaurant. Imagine a food court where all you could hear is the crinkle of wrappers and plastic silverware and from soda cups and like that kind of thing.
Oh man.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's one of the reasons why it's not even to get us to buy, it's to make us not uncomfortable. What does that say about us? Like, I actually do the same thing. Well, I don't do the exact same thing. I do like bring Bluetooth headphones and listen. I feel so much better when I can play my own music now. When I'm at a grocery store, because I can just ignore the other people and not have to listen to the grocery store music. But I should actually try that noise canceling headphones and see how that works, because now I'm really curious to see how uncomfortable it will make me.
Pure silence.
One thing also though about the Mallsoft though, it's very nostalgic for a particular era of shopping, which is sort of the height of the shopping mall as a consumer locale. Because as you mentioned, we buy as many things as we can online because dear God, we have to, I don't want to go to the store. But back in the 1980s and 90s, when most of us who listened to vaporwave were kids, and headphones were not as nearly socially acceptable as they are now. Everyone can have headphones or earbuds in now, and that's just normal. But back then, you were really putting a big fuck off vibe, I think.
Oh yeah, that's I always remember a little off topic, but in like the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, like the kid puts on headphones and it's like a big deal. His dad's like, oh, whenever he doesn't want to listen to me, he puts on those things. I don't even know where he got him. And it's like, it's like this huge parental fuck you to just put on some headphones. Yeah. And then nobody's even talking to you. Like they weren't even talking to the kid. It was just like, oh man, nowadays I can't imagine existing without headphones in public.
Mallsoft is about our memories of going to malls and our experiences shopping. And, there's this sort of, I think, unresolvable tension between we are being manipulated by capitalism to buy things and like we are now, and also we have to have music because silence makes us uncomfortable. And what does that say about us? Versus I actually did have fun going to the mall when I was a kid and I could go to the arcade and play video games and it was a nice place. There's no way to resolve it, but like Mallsoft, I think, is good because it's also exploring this music, taking the music out of its original context and putting it into our context where we can listen to it as we choose. And we could sort of like go back and sort of meditate upon that and sort of like come to terms with our past experiences. It is trite and insipid, but like these artists are doing interesting things with it. So it's not, it's recontextualizing it and making it interesting by what they do with it. It's also very anti-capitalist in a lot of ways because these artists are largely anonymous. They're skirting or breaking copyright law by just like grabbing whatever they want and throwing it up as a free download. It's downright socialism, what it is.
I love it.
You know, it's okay to like Mallsoft and still think muzak, mall music is horrible and insipid and trite because they're different, even though they sound similar because it's all about the context.
Yep.
Mallsoft is there for you. You can be at the mall, at least in spirit. It's okay to think this is kind of fucked up, yet kind of relaxing at the same time, because that's what haunted music's all about. It's fucked up and relaxing at the same time.
So what fucked up and relaxing albums are we doing? So we're actually not doing like the big Mallsoft release, which is probably Palm Mall by Cat Court.
Yeah, anytime you talk about Mallsoft, that's the big one that pops off immediately. And it's a fine album. There's nothing wrong with it. If you like these two albums, you should listen to that next. My choice is Yes, We're Open by Siglifyum Groceries, which is a Korean word for foodstuffs. And what is your choice?
I'm doing Hologram Plaza by Disconscious. So these are kind of the other two pillar albums, I would say, of Mallsoft's inception. So let's get into it. All right, so that was the track Mattress Store off the 2013 album Hologram Plaza by Disconscious. Sort of introducing this album is unlike others because it doesn't really, in what we're talking about in sort of this anonymous copyright skirting, it actually doesn't have like a long, grandiose concept behind it. I think this is the artist's like only major release. They've never done any interviews. They've never said like, oh, this is actually my real name. I released it under this name. Now check out my other music. So I really think this album is just a natural sort of growing out of the concepts of anti-consumerism and criticism of capitalism that were sort of growing in Vaporwave in 2013. And it just sort of naturally evolved into something new, this idea of consumption in spaces.
Yeah, I actually tried to look up the artist as well, and all I could find was one Reddit thread where like, does anybody know anything about this artist? And like,
I found the same one. I found the same one that was like, who is this guy?
Yeah, some people thought they were a Hong Kong Express, who is a very popular and somewhat controversial vaporwave artist, but it's very common for vaporwave artists to take multiple names, you know, have multiple aliases, but nobody stepped forward to this, and they've never released anything else, which is a shame. But on the other hand, at least they gave us this.
Yeah. So the way this album is structured is like most Mallsoft albums. It's a concept album for shopping. It starts with a track called Elevator Up, then leads you through a set of tracks of kind of moving through a lobby and various stores in a mall, and then concludes with Elevator Down. So I actually chose this because, as we said earlier, it's sort of one of the pillar albums of the genre. And I'd actually not heard it. I'd heard Yes, We're Open, and I've heard Pall Mall, which I almost picked, but I realized I'd not heard this sort of the other album out of the trifecta. So that's why I use this as an excuse to sort of rectify that. So what did you think of it? Have you heard it before?
Yeah, actually, this was actually one of the other Mallsoft albums I listened to more than a few times.
Okay.
The first album I discovered was Yes, We're Open, and that was it. But there are like two or three other albums. There was this. I mean, there's a ton of albums. There's one called North Point Mall, I believe. Yeah, North Point Mall by VHS Dreams, and that's another one I listened to quite a bit. I quite enjoyed it because, again, Mallsoft is very much background listening kind of music. It is very much put it on, listen to whatever. And the great thing about Mallsoft is you only need the one album, and you could just put it on loop forever, and you wouldn't notice until like maybe 4 or 5 hours in, even though these albums are relatively short. I like this one because it feels more like an American mall than Yes, We're Open.
Okay.
We'll get into that because I feel like, yeah, Yes, You're Open is more maybe the music feels a little different than an American Mall to me. So this one though does, because there's more somewhat recognizable pop music in it. There's more, like you said, this from the 60s to the 90s kind of range of music, which I feel like back in the ye olden days of the 80s and 90s, mall music wasn't as expertly curated or engineered to a degree, especially in the main venues of stores or the main hallways. They would play one music and different stores would have their own soundtracks. But like the overall mall music would be this mix of easy listening and bossa nova and, pop music, because they had to cater also to the mall walkers, and the old people. So yeah, this is like the mall, that I went to when I was a kid. It's everyone's mall. And I really like how the narrative is structured in terms of how it goes through space. Like you even have the elevator door ding at the beginning. Like that was great. I love that part.
That's really interesting that you sort of frame it in terms of American versus, because the other album we'll talk about is a Korean album, technically. I didn't attribute those differences, though. I agree with it now that you say it, but that's interesting. I just sort of took it up as like very different theming. So I'll have to listen to them again and think about it in that context. So a few things about this album that I noticed and that people might notice when they listen to it. First of all, I wonder if this actually sounds like, if people who do not have any familiarity with the genre, if this sounds like what they think it would, because it almost just sounds like vaporwave at times. I think, we talked about in previous episodes how once vaporwave kind of became a thing that would get you on the algorithm, there's a lot of lazy vaporwave of just reverb and slow down a pop song. And I feel like that sort of also happened to Mallsoft, where there's this trend of, I guess they're a little bit more meme videos, so maybe it's not fair, but there's the idea of like, oh, this song playing in another room, where you would just put like a little bit of reverb and muffle out the bass.
Especially like one of the first tracks on the album, Enter the Lobby, is very much a standard kind of vaporwave song.
Yeah, it's a little echo jam type thing of a pop sample.
I think, there is a huge sort of, I wouldn't say a glut, but there are quite a few vaporwave and Mallsoft albums that are like, oh, okay, I can take this pop music, run these filters through it, and then mix in field recording at 20%, and like there, I'm done. 2 hours tops, for an album. But this is a little more insidious, I think. One of the things I liked is as you go on, it gets a little like there's sort of like a time warp thing where you start out with the pop music, and then by the time you get to the food court, it's like lounge music. Field recordings become more prominent.
Yes, I noticed that as well. There's actually sounds of like utensils hitting plates.
I quite enjoy that. Sometimes with albums, I will look at the YouTube comments, which I know is not always recommended, but it actually reminds me, there used to be a blog that would like go through songs and look for YouTube comments about like people talking about what this song meant to them in their life. And it was just screenshots of people like, I remember I had to get up at work and it was on the radio, and that was the day my wife left me, and or that was the day I got a promotion. It's just like these major life stories changed to some song from 30 years ago, and like, whoa, those memories are gone now because those YouTube comments are gone. But just to read a few comments from this album. This album reminds me of a day that malls will not exist. Malls will simply be a memory, a foggy, hazy, smoked out memory. On a side note, this genre also reminds me of the good days as a kid in the 80s and 90s. So thank you for making this stuff. We are definitely listening. And then, fuck, this brings back memories of the 90s when I was a kid and would go to the mall and buy a new Sega Genesis or Super Nintendo game, and then go pig out at the food court while muzak was playing throughout the mall. Lovely memories. So like having this here as sort of like a free, like, oh, here's what you remember, not the top charts, but like that weird mall music. And it's not that obviously wasn't the exact music that they were listening to, but it invokes that memory. Cause like, there are thousands of malls and stores out there with God knows how much music, but like one album can invoke the same memory in so many different experiences. It's memories of something that didn't exactly happen. And I kind of like that.
Yeah. So let's give people an example of sort of what we're talking about. Here's a little bit of a sample from Absent Interlude. Yeah, so this song has this sample. It's actually not listed on who sampled.
Yeah, the who sampled for this album is not 100% complete. How dare these volunteers not?
How dare they not give me the free information? But it's like this echo jam, sort of what you think of as like vaporwave, this sort of muffled pop, and then it just has this sharp cutoff in that vocal, and there's like this very disorienting like back around, like kind of snap you back into. I don't know. I really like stuff that kind of like loops for a second and then it just jarringly snaps you out of it, like wakes you back up.
One of the things I also like about the samples, the choices of samples for this album is they go outside of what would have been playing at a mall and go to things that sound kind of like it would have been played at a mall. And I think that's real interesting. Like the one that really grabs me is they actually sampled Tim and Eric, awesome show, great job. One of the clips for that. And they sample that. The clip is, of course, Focus on Comedy starring Michael Ian Black. And it's like a 2-minute little short from Tim and Eric, awesome show, great job, which is a very glitch art vaporwave. Well, not quite vaporwave, but very.
It's close.
It's adjacent. Yeah.
I appreciate you saying the whole show name every time.
Well, I mean,
you're a fucking professional.
I am a fucking professional. Thank you. Thank you, Burke.
You're welcome.
The music in it is only played for like 20 seconds and it's only like one little loop. It's like a 15-second loop that they loop a couple times. And they use that for the entire song. Mallsoft is supposed to not be like noticeable when you listen to, but this song, you notice it.
Yeah.
It's so basic. Again, there's this, what I call this unresolvable tension. It's like, it's supposed to be relaxing, but yet, nope, it's not quite relaxing because this is a little off. This is a little weird. Why am I listening to this? I kind of like these. It's not as abrupt or jarring as, say, like echo jams would be, but it's interesting. And that's what separates it from music, because music would never do that. Music is totally designed to lull you into like a coma. And this is just keeping part of your brain active, like, nope, this is not right. And part of your brain's like, no, it is right. And so it's, tension. I like it.
Me too. So overall, if I had to say that there's any weakness with this album or things, is that I think it's more a function of the album coming out before this was really like properly codified as a subgenre. But I do think it doesn't quite lean into the Mallsoft modern, like Mallsoft theming as hard as it could. In that I think that, I don't know, if I'm being unfair, let me know, but there's not quite the same creation of space as we'll hear in Yes or Open.
I can see that. I think the towards the end of the album, it actually picks up. It actually gets better for that.
Yeah.
I think Midnight Specimen is probably the best to capture that, because you have this echoing jazz sax with mall field recordings. And I think that kind of captures that, like that one song sort of captures being alone in public, as you mentioned, being in public, which I didn't even think about that aspect of it.
Yeah.
It's quiet of the soul. No one is talking to you. It's just a light jazz and the echoes of a nearly empty mall, but it's not quite empty. There's people there. And so you're by yourself, and we think silence is terrifying, but that is almost as terrifying to be surrounded by light jazz and nothing else is around you. And you are forced to go introspective more than you would be comfortable with, unless you can repress all that and just focus on the shopping that's left to be done.
Work through your list.
Yeah. I mean, who hasn't had that moment in a mall?
Sure.
And then, of course, as you're leaving the mall, you have this classical music, sort of the violins playing you off. So it's kind of like, you're an adult. You did things. You're classy because you shopped here. Thank you. Now get the fuck out.
Thank you for driving our economy.
Yeah, but I like that bit of classical music as you're leaving, trying to like reward you for being a good, mature, intelligent shopper.
Absolutely. So definitely, I would say check this album out. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. No, it's, okay. I mean, it's not a super long listen to anyway.
Yeah. That's the nice thing is if you hate it, you don't take very long to get through it.
And you could loop it forever.
That's true. And not notice, which I actually did when I was listening to it the first time.
Yeah. Aside from that one, Shopping Delirium, I think is the one with the Tim and Eric sample.
Yeah, that's correct. Shopping Delirium has a little bit of like can't get started stuttering that sort of takes you out. And then the sample earlier, Absent Interlude, has this purposeful, like hard cut vocal sample.
So yeah, it's definitely, half an hour of your life to trigger all these memories of your experiences shopping in malls and force you to think, was it good? Was it bad? Was it a little bit of both? I don't know. But, let's have some violins play you off. And we're back. That was Aisle 2, Parallel Lines, Oscillating Fans, and Public Access Broadcasting from Yes, We're Open by Groceries. I will not try to mispronounce that word again. It is a Korean word for foodstuffs, so I guess that's the word they use for grocery stores over there. And I love this album. Full disclosure, I actually bought this album on cassette as part of a Super Shopper bundle where I got not only all 3 of Groceries albums, I also got a tote bag with that on there.
Shit.
Yeah, it was only $30 or so. And I am looking at my cassette for Yes, We're Open right now.
Wow. Oh.
Ooh, sound effects.
Yeah. Finally, we have them.
This is not the Dream cataloged cassette version of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there are a couple different pressings. One thing about vaporwave in general is that, there's a lot of albums are released on cassette.
Mm-hmm.
Some are released on vinyl. Some are, of course, released on CD. But there's a lot of bootlegging that goes on, especially with the cassettes, because it's easy to make bootleg cassettes. And, vaporwave fans have more money than sense, I guess. That's kind of a problem. But the discogs for the vaporwave cassette scene is wild.
Yes.
So yeah, before I get too much into the album, what were your sort of impressions of it?
All right. So this is also a loaded episode because I also love this album. And I think hearing it right after listening to Hologram Plaza kind of made me love it more in terms of what I was talking about with theming. So this album also, concept takes you through a store shopping.
Mm-hmm.
But I love everything about it. So I think the choices of aisles are really interesting. So first thing is this feels, what I was saying is difference in concept I didn't attribute to regional or national differences, is this one is so much more fantastical than Hologram Plaza. Hologram Plaza is still very rooted in a more realistic shopping experience, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're still walking through them all because this has so all the tracks are aisles except for a few, and they all list what they sell. And it's all abstract or metaphysical things. It's not like Prada, right? So they sell hairstyles, power-ups, and magnetic. They sell summits, clouds, and greener grass. And each track really, really leans into that aisle theme in a very fantastical way. So there's more sound effects that are fake, or not fake, but fantastical sound effects. So it opens up with this very dramatic welcome. And then it has stuff like Super Mario star collecting sound effect, which I guess is you achieved a shopping goal. And just overall, I think that combined with the samples, because I think has a broader range of samples than Hologram Plaza. So it has these soaring Buddhist world music, kind of cheesy things.
Yeah.
Or video game sound effects, like I said. Others, I don't know if they're samples, but are also just weird in the Mallsoft context, but in the best possible way. So aisle 4, I said, was hairstyles, power-ups, and magnetic tape. But it sounds like video game music, right? It sounds like royalty-free Guile's theme. If you wanted a legally distinct Street Fighter soundtrack.
Legally distinct. So,
yeah.
I like that. Important. Yeah. For me, one of the things, I think this is more a commentary. I didn't spend my childhood going to malls in Tokyo, but I have visited some stores in Asia. And I remember music like that, especially that world music kind of playing and sort of the flute. And certainly, of course, whenever you go to a massage place or a spa or whatever, it plays that. And so I kind of associate that with a different style of mall music. So now the artist who behind this Groceries has been publicly identified as a person.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, his name is Jordan Bortner. He lives in Korea. He is an English teacher there. Actually is touring and sometimes as a vaporwave artist. In fact, he was with Vaporer and a few others Telepath for a concert called Neo Gaia Legends in Tokyo recently, as of the recording of this episode in November 2019. He is an expat in Korea. And so I think a lot of this is about that experience. And I've talked to other expats and I can kind of see where he's coming from a little bit of just being with something that's kind of familiar, but also not. Of course, love this album. The video game sounds, the little punctuations, the abstracting theme, as you mentioned. There's also, like I said, sort of a more sense of a geographic space. You're going from aisle to aisle. There's a lot of fade ins and fade outs, I think, of going from one aisle to the other. And so you're wandering the store playing different music in different sections. And I quite like it. I've listened to this many times. That's why I bought cassette. But I think we can both agree that it's really the key to this album is the middle, the interlude.
Oh, yeah.
I could talk about that for a while, but do you want to talk about it first?
I do. But first, let's play a sample. All right, so that was the track Lost in the Freezer section, the interlude in the middle of this. I love everything about this track. Immediately when I heard it, I was like, oh, this is Blade Runner as fuck.
Mm-hmm.
So because I have a very deep love of Blade Runner, like I just saw that kind of at the right point in my life where it'll always be my most favorite film and aesthetic. That's probably like the closest I had to like early synth vaporwave stuff too when I was a kid.
I mean, without Vangelis, there wouldn't be synthwave or vaporwave.
Oh yeah, yeah, totally. And this really does sound like a first draft for like that Vangelis soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Like the synth patches are they almost feel like they're pulled from that album, and it's got like this horn. There's the song Blade Runner Blues on the album that has like this lingering melancholy sax piece.
Yeah, it's very mournful, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good word for it, like regretful or mournful. What did you want to say about it?
For me, like the title alone, Lost in the Freezer section, like it really, for me, I visualize this person's journey through this fantastical store where you can buy summons and rapid eye movement, and then they get lost in the freezer section. And this is like a Campbellian arc where the hero is at his lowest point, and you're just trapped there, and you're mourning, because it also, like, emotionally, I connect to it, because who has not had an existential crisis at least once in a while when you're shopping? When you're looking at an aisle with 30 different types of pasta sauce and you're trying to choose which one, and you're looking at fucking nutritional labels and brands, and you're just like, God, why am I doing this? Why is my life turned to this? I'm wasting my limited time on this planet.
It's all toothpaste. Who cares?
It's all toothpaste.
Because isn't there like studies that like people can only process like a handful of decision like at a time?
There's a well-documented thing that like there's a tyranny of choice. Like too many choices is worse than no choice at all in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And the thing is, there's a part of your back of mind, no, it does matter. If you get the wrong toothpaste bottle, your teeth are going to fucking rot out, and that's going to be more pain and agony later on. And if you get the wrong pasta sauce, you'll get unhealthier. It'll taste like crap, and you'll ruin tonight's cooking. And like it never ends. And it's just because like a lot of people like to shop, it's relaxing, but there's also, oh God, it can be so fucking horrible.
It's assaulting.
Yeah, it's assaulting, but it's also like mournful, because it's just like it's not a violent thing. It's just this. And this is the perfect soundtrack for that. Ah, God, why am I?
How did I get here?
I'm lost in this aisle. I'm lost in the freezer section of my soul. You know, I keep saying soul. It's God. I this is why I fell in love with this album, because sometimes it's just one song that like hooks you on an album. I mean, the rest of the album is fine. I like it, but God, sometimes I just listen to that one song.
Nice. Yeah, I can totally get that. I totally get that.
I mean, there are other techniques, like again, the sense of space, like it definitely sounds like it was recorded in situ rather than like a studio recording. You know, and I of course quite enjoy that. It's just this, like, again, the fade outs too between, it's like this, you know, the wave of sound flows over you as you leave. Oh yeah, that's sort of the ending, but yeah, the transitions are quite great. We could go on and on about Lost in the Freezer section, but that's sort of the key for me.
Yeah, sure. So pivoting a little bit, one thing that really surprised me about this album, I cannot believe, and this would be interesting to dig into in an episode, is how many of these samples are not Weather Channel music. Because so many of them. So like there's the Weather Channel sample on Hologram Plaza, and I ID'd it immediately. It just sticks out. There's just something about that music.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a lot of that same feeling in the samples in this album, but they're not. And I'm wondering if they are, you know, the music that inspired sort of Weather Channel.
Well, we're also looking at albums from like 2013 and 2014. So we're back 5-6 years ago. The Weather Channel was not as deeply mined as it is now, I think.
That's definitely true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not going to be angry for them for being the first to hit on that.
Oh, I'm not angry. It was just interesting.
I would definitely be more critical of an album released now that used a lot of 90s Weather Channel music, unless they did something really interesting with it. For me, again, the ending is also really good. Of the standard album, we'll talk about the bonus track next, but as you're leaving the store, there's this wave of sound that flows over you as you leave the store. You're just like pulled out of the grocery store and left, and then it just fades to silence. It's like you're just like sucked out of it, just like, and you know, it's kind of like going through the grocery store. Like they have that kind of airlock thing where the carts are. You get a little bit of sound and then nothing, and then you're just out there with your cart and your food, and you're done. And it was exhausting, and you fucked up and you bought the wrong things, or you forgot something. You have to go back, or you have to do without. So it's very much the perfect ending for this album, because that it replicates that experience.
I agree.
So there is a bonus track. You can listen to it on the YouTube cut or the YouTube rip of it, but it's not on the Bandcamp release. So track 13, Bronze Level Store Loyalty Card. Very much a energetic sort of EDM kind of song with, it's just like simple and earnest and just like, aha, you shopped and you earned loyalty points. Good for you. And I mean, it's fine. It's definitely kind of jarring to hear that at the end after like the real ending of the album. So that's why it's a bonus track. It destroys the narrative on the YouTube rip, but like, as a fun little bonus track, I don't really, mind it.
That's interesting because I did not think of it as breaking the narrative, because until I went and looked at the Bandcamp page, I listened to this on YouTube first. So I sort of thought of it as a joke of like, it's a loyalty card for shopping and you stuck around an extra 30 seconds. So here's like your loyalty card and a little upbeat, happy song to go with it. So it didn't really, because I didn't know any better, it didn't really break that for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it does kind of bring up a lot. Several vaporwave artists have kind of done this thing of putting bonus tracks just on physical media releases. And, what is the authentic experience? Is there even one? But
well, that was a thing in like the 90s too, of like the bonus track at the end of the CD.
Oh yeah, no,
I don't know if you remember that, but
yeah, vaguely that does. Yeah, especially you'd have like a bunch of silence.
Yeah, like 3 minutes of silence, and then it'd be like, oh, one last little cut.
Yeah, but this isn't like 3 minutes of silence. It's like,
no.
Yeah, they just immediately go from the end of checkout, have a nice day, to Bronze Level Store Loyalty Card. Yeah, if they put 3 minutes of silence in front of it and then put it in there, I think it would have been better, because then it'd be like, oh, it's still going? It's kind of a little mystery to be resolved. And then, it was rewarded with a bonus song. But like, I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't fit with the album. I can see why it was cut from the main album. But yeah, it's a fun little song. So I think that's about it for both these albums.
Yeah.
I looked up the Vaporwave Reddit. There's not only a Vaporwave Reddit, but there's also a Mallsoft specific one. What I like is they have a little description of it. And the key phrase in here is the repetition of the music eventually forces its way into the listener's mind subconsciously to be recalled later at a date as a memory of something that may or may not have happened.
Okay.
I like this idea of, again, sort of inventing memories, because again, there's thousands of people who've listened to this music and they, this is just like my childhood, but it wasn't this music. It wasn't exactly like they didn't choose Tim and Eric samples looped to make it kind of creepy and weird. That wasn't your childhood, buddy. I'm sorry. I don't know what you remember.
Wow. How dare you?
Well, I mean, it didn't like that loop didn't exist back in the 90s.
That's a real good point.
Yeah. So that's something to think about. But our next episode will be a topic, not album review. And you chose this topic.
We chose the topic, comrade.
We did choose a topic, but do you want to introduce it?
Yeah, absolutely. So next week, instead of listening to two albums, we're going to dive into some plunderphonics. There's a term coined in the 80s based around the idea of stealing music and repurposing it as a compositional tool. So, of course, it's heavily rooted in sort of what Vaporwave does. It's probably, Vaporwave in some sense is probably a subgenre itself of plunderphonics. So we're going to dig into that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really cool things that have been done with plunderphonics that predate Vaporwave, and we'll look at some of that, like Emergency Broadcast Network. I was just reminded of its existence today, which was passed around on 3.5-inch floppy disks at music festivals as musical videos, where they sampled broadcast news and cut that into music by just using the reporter's voice into an instrument to make very satirical and weird, catchy songs. There's a lot of other really cool stuff with plunderphonics. So we won't be reviewing specific albums, just going over it as sort of a concept. And I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think it's a surprisingly deep thing to dig into, because I think it also does get into a lot of the ethics and aesthetics of Vaporwave as well.
Yep. This has been episode 4 of Night Clerk Radio, Mallsoft. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed our little crash course in it. My Twitter handle is @RossPayton.
And I am @Burke McBurkinson. And you can also find us at Night Clerk Radio.
We thank you so much for listening to the show. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcast or your podcasting app of choice. And also share it with your friends if you liked us. Send us comments, feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Keep on listening.